All right, so let's go ahead and begin Chapter 13 review. Chapter 13 review is your spinal cord, somatic reflexes, and spinal nerves. So it's spinal cord, spinal nerves, somatic reflexes. As you see, Chapter 13 up on the board, they have a little picture. It's interesting to note that different layers or different levels of the spinal cord during injury will result in certain types of body issues, if you would. So from tetraplegia to paraplegia, you can see that at certain levels of the cord, that damage will result in certain parts of the body being um, affected. Again, it's not a comprehensive review. You're responsible for all the reading. It's a pretty big chapter again. Nervous system is very gray. It's not really black and white when it comes to the clinical aspects of neurology or the nervous system. But when it comes to the actual structures of the nervous system, they are pretty easy to remember as long as you maybe draw a picture of a cross section of the spinal cord, understand different tracks that occurs in the ascending and descending tracks. So there's a lot of different types of information that you could put into different forms, such as flashcards or drawings to help you. Again, you're responsible for the whole entire chapter. As we go through the review, I may repeat myself or I may jump ahead or jump back, but as you know from the other reviews, it's pretty straightforward. So you should need to understand what's an upper motor neuron versus a lower motor neuron. Where are they located? What do they do? What happens if the upper motor neuron is affected versus the lower motor neuron is affected? Where is it located and what do they do? For example, maybe upper motor neuron is located in the ventral horn of the spinal cord, okay, or not. Depends on what you're looking for. No parts of the spinal cord cross section. Now, when I say parts, when you take a spinal cord and you slice it horizontally, okay, right across the body, you reveal different tracks. So that's what I'm really asking you to understand. Understand the spinal cord cross section from the standpoint of, I know in lab you have a spinal cord cross section. You have the dorsal horn versus the ventral horn. You have the peripheral nerves coming out. You have the ganglia. Also, you should know different tracks in the spinal cord. Technospinal versus corticospinal versus spinocerebellar, gracilis, cuneatus, and all the above. There's going to be no pictures on the exam. It's all multiple choice, but you need to know the function of the technospinal versus corticospinal, which ones travel down, which ones travel up. Okay, so a good cross section of the spinal cord will definitely reveal those tracks that ascend the spinal cord and those that descend the spinal cord. Not all these tracks make it from the top to the bottom of the spinal cord. Some begin at T4, some begin at T6. Some don't go past T8. So you'd be familiar with those that ascend and descend the track, as well as those that, and their function, I should say. Okay, so this is stuff that I learned in medical school, so you're not too far off from medical school. This is information that if you do pursue that direction, maybe you want to be, maybe you're looking to be a nurse, an RN in the neurology section of a hospital. Then you're going to need to know this stuff, and it is pretty much taught on all different levels. Plexuses. Cervical plexus versus brachial plexus, lumbar plexus, sacral plexus. Know the branches. For example, cervical plexus has the auricular nerve, occipital nerve, phrenic nerve. It doesn't have the radial nerve or the musculocutaneous nerve or the brachial nerve, right? So be familiar with those of the plexuses, those nerves, those structures of the plexuses. Again, back to upper motor neuron versus lower motor neuron. Upper motor neuron, you'll have the ventral horn versus the lower motor will be in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. Kind of repeats from chapter 12, but neurolemma versus endoneurium versus perineurium. It kind of repeats a little bit here. You'll be fine with that. Sensory neurons. Okay, what information is conveyed along a ventral horn versus a dorsal horn? How does sensory enter the spinal cord? How does motor leave the spinal cord? Right, all information enters from one direction and exits another direction of the spinal cord. So be familiar with the ventral horn versus dorsal horn. Again, lumbar plexus and sacral plexus should have been up higher, but again, there's different plexuses or plexi of the spinal cord that come out of the spinal cord. You should be familiar with those structures of each of those plexuses. Reflex arc. Different types of reflexes. They have different arcs. Basically, withdrawal reflex versus a regular monosynaptic, polysynaptic type reflexes. Be familiar with efferent nerves. So there might be some questions like, say, so you have an efferent nerve coming from the arm. Okay, what's it pass through? So it passes from the root to the trunk to the division to the cord. Right? So you need to know the structures. This kind of goes back to that cross section of the spinal cord, the one that you have in lab. I've put a couple of videos in for you as well, the course. So be familiar with that type of linear progression. Right? So information goes from the roots to the trunks to the division and cords, right, in that order. Dorsal root ganglia, right? So if we look at sensory function of the dorsal root ganglia, one type of information that may be passed along the dorsal root ganglia is the sensation of touch, whereas in smell, hearing, taste, and vision, you would not, because those are cranial nerves. So if we're touching something, that information is portrayed from receptors to the dorsal root ganglion. Information enters one direction of the cord and exits another direction from the cord. So be familiar with that. I apologize for the pause. I'm just kind of going through some questions as well, so a little more specific for you. Sciatic nerve, where is it located? Tibial nerve, femoral nerve, saphenous nerve. Be familiar with those. How the spinal cord is broken up into regions, cervical versus thoracic versus lumbar, and that's it. There's no other region. There's no pelvic region. There's no sacral region. It's just those areas. Reflex arcs, again, going back, again, you have the monosynaptic versus polysynaptic. There's ipsilateral reflexes versus contralateral reflexes. What happens, what's a contralateral reflex, right? The withdrawal reflex is contralateral. You step on a nail with your left foot, and your right foot jumps back, right? It's a reflex to get away from the insult on the left side. Be familiar with that type of information. Intersegmental reflexes, be familiar with those. And then some terms. Gamma motor neurons, be familiar with gamma motor neurons. Be familiar with, oh, there it is, withdrawal reflex. So I apologize for jumping around. So it's that contralateral versus ipsilateral. What occurs during the withdrawal reflex? I can't stress enough the tracts of the spinal cord. Okay, be familiar with the functions. For example, technospinal tract, right? Reflexes of the head due to visual and auditory stimuli. Somebody throws a baseball at you and they yell your name. That's an audio reflex. You're going to turn, and of course, visually, hopefully you're looking quick to move your head out of the way, whatever. So technospinal tract, kind of be familiar with that. Withdrawal reflex. I said that already. I want you to learn how does the spinal cord tether itself to the sacrum. Another definition you should be familiar with is alpha motor neurons. So gamma versus alpha, where are they located, what do they do, how do they function? Again, I said this already, saphenous nerve, locational function versus the femoral nerve versus the tibial, popliteal, so forth and so on. Annual spiral endings, another term you should be familiar with, intrafusal and extrafusal fibers. Where are they located? How do they work? Extra means outside something. So you have a receptor or a fiber outside, whereas intra is going to be inside an area. Be familiar with the meningeal branch that's given off. Check out that cross section again. Here's my hand. Cross section again of the spinal cord. enlargements in the spinal cord. Okay, you have a cervical enlargement and a lumbar enlargement. Why are they enlarged? Why is the spinal cord enlarged in those areas? Right? Think plexuses, cauda equina. Be familiar with that term. Again, where does the spinal cord begin and where does it end? Now, we know the spinal cord doesn't go all the way down to L5, right? It ends at a certain level, and then we have the cauda equina. Cauda equina means tail of a horse. Okay, cauda means equina. Equina means horse, cauda's tail. Right, so the cauda equina is a tail of the horse. Where does it begin? Subarachnoid space, be familiar with the CSF flow around. Pia mater, I think it's coming up. Structures of the spinal cord and their function, already said that. Some more information are terms denticulate ligaments, pia mater, dura mater, arachnoid mater. CSF, has it all work together? Where are they located? Again, the cross-section of the spinal cord has all this. You should be able to peel away the layers of the dura mater, the outermost layer, go into the pia mater with the arachnoid mater in the middle. Epidural space versus subarachnoid space. There's spaces in there. And what occurs in those spaces? What goes on in those spaces? Different conditions, chickenpox, varicella, where is it located? How does it relate to shingles? Spina bifida, ALS, shingles, like I already said that, and then quadriplegia versus paraplegia, and again, issues with that. Meaning, how does it occur? Whatever the textbook talks about. If you're looking at a signal, if you want information, let's see, you're following a signal from a sensory neuron to the spinal cord where it synapses with a motor neuron that leaves the spinal cord and synapses on a skeletal muscle. The route that you're going to take is going to be dorsal root to dorsal horn to ventral root, to ventral horn to ventral root to spinal nerve. So it's going to go root, horn, root, spinal nerve. Dorsal root to dorsal horn. Ventral horn to ventral root, and then spinal nerve. It kind of sounds complicated, but if you look at the textbook and read of how the signal is going to follow, where is it going, that's the route you're going to take. Be familiar with like the medulla oblongata, the word decussate, I think it's coming up, right? To cross over. Where do things cross over? We have tracks that ascend the cord, they cross over and then go up to the brain. Or they come down from the brain, they cross over, right? We have ipsilateral versus contralateral tracks. Those ipsilateral tracks versus contralateral tracks, that's why we have some information on one side of our body integrated from the right side of our, one side of our brain and vice versa. These tracks cross over. That's why we have the ability to use both sides of our body and different sides of our brain. First order neurons versus second order neurons versus third order neurons. Be familiar with those orders. Right? Let's see. Ventral root carries motor neurons. Dorsal roots carry sensory neurons. And that kind of tells you, hey, sensory in the back, motor out the front. Dorsal sensory in the spinal cord, ventral anterior out the front. Plexuses, dermatome. What's a dermatome? The order of a somatic reflex would be like somatic receptor, it's afferent fiber, interneuron, efferent nerve fiber to skeletal muscle. Right? So again, we have the afferent to interneuron to efferent. On the outside of that, we can put a reflex. We can stretch a receptor, somatic receptor, activates the afferent to bring information to the spinal cord. One interneuron, maybe it's just monosynaptic, to the efferent and then out to the skeletal muscle for a little reflex. Intrafusal versus extrafusal, said that already. Alpha motor neuron versus gamma motor neurons. Stretch reflex, what is that? Versus flexor reflex, withdrawal reflex, cross extensor reflex. I know they're in the textbook. Okay. And contralateral reflexes, Golgi tendon apparatus. that should wrap it up. All right, so again, a lot of information. I may have gone over a little too quickly, but you can always re-listen to this. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments when it comes to neurology or neuro, the last two chapters of the nervous system, you can see there's a plethora of information, but a lot of it integrates with each other. So once you start putting it all together and figuring out how it's going to read, quote unquote read, then you should be able to discern and be able to decipher it all. Any questions, concerns, or comments, feel free to email me, and good luck.